cycling now, and just want to pick up an issue that we've been concerned about. We have been promised since December full details of funding TfL is committing to each borough for Mini Holland's Quiet Ways and other cycling programmes, but this has yet to be released by Transport for London. When can we expect to get this detail? Because we would like to fully scrutinise it, and we're going to have Andrew Gilligan back for our next meeting.
I'll find out. I can't see why you can't have it imminently, because certainly we've committed to Mini Holland's funding itself.
But then there's all the boroughs have been promised some aspects of their Mini Holland, or there's all sorts of words going around. We want to actually see in detail what has been promised and what's going to be delivered.
Let me take it away, Caroline. I don't know where
we do need it in more than just a couple of days before our next meeting. We need to look at that in detail.
Okay.
Thank you. And one of the things, when you came before us last year, I think it was, we flagged with you the underspend on cycling, and you actually said at the time, what this underspend represents is frankly an embarrassment.
Yep.
In an answer to a recent question I've had, you still only spent 29 million on this year's cycling budget. So you're looking at a huge underspend potentially again. Well, why is this, and why aren't you able to get the money out the door to be spent on these cycling projects that London wants and the boroughs desperately want to progress?
Well, I've got a feeling that number is a part-year number and not a full-year number.
Well, obviously we're still in the year, yeah.
We still are in the year. But these schemes, I'm less embarrassed than I was last year, because I think there is a lot more sign of visible progress. But what is quite clear, and you'll know it from the considerable controversy derived from the cycle superhighway proposals, is that these things aren't easy to design, and when you do design them, you get a lot of consultation responses about things that people would like you to do with them. And indeed, we're still not out of the woods, because some of the representatives of the large audience that you had earlier seem, at least from their words, to be pretty determined to judicially review the East West Cycle Superhighway. And if there is a judicial review, and if there is, it will probably take several months, then we'll have all that lot delayed again. So there is a difficulty in getting them designed. There's a difficulty in addressing meaningfully the results of the consultation, and then at last you get to delivery. Now, there is some delivery, because if you go down the Whitechapel Road, you can see signs of CSH 2 and 5, which we've started to deliver, and that money will get out the door. But I think that you do have to be mindful of the fact that there really is a lot of controversy attending to these things, and there are all sorts of people who actually either don't want them or don't want them in the particular form in which we've designed them. I think we're going the right way. If you've looked at the consultation, for example, about the Bow roundabout, we've now got another set of proposals which include pedestrian access. We're getting bolder about what we think we can do. It isn't without its critics. Most boroughs always find concern over some aspect or other. You'll have seen with the East West Cycle Superhighway, the Royal Parks don't seem to be too keen in front of Buckingham Palace. And it's all time that it takes to fix that. They haven't been too keen for some time, and I quite like them to sort themselves out. But it's quite hard to do. I think the result of it is going to be, you know, by all accounts, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but by and large the Transport Committee and the Assembly have been very supportive of doing these proposals. But if you get 20,000 consultation responses, you're under a massive obligation to have read them all, even though it's alleged that we haven't, because if you haven't read them and haven't taken them into account, you will be successfully judicially reviewed. So I'm less apologetic than I was, because I think there is clear evidence of progress. And in fact, I think, I think, as you said, that some of the road users in London have to accept sometimes decisions that are taken on behalf of one set of people that have an adverse effect on the others.
Okay. Can I just pick up briefly a couple of points you made about the judicial review? How do you respond to the threat of this judicial review, and how long? You said a few months, I think. Is that how long you think it will delay the scheme?
Well, it's up to some of the people who have at least said they're considering it to do it, and we can't know what they might claim. Broadly speaking, there are two ways you can do it without giving people unhelpful advice which against their own interest. One of which is that the process hasn't been carried out properly, and the other is that in some way the design doesn't represent something which is in the reasonable range of things that we and the Mayor should do. And I don't know which one of it is. Leon and I and Howard and others have been very concerned to make sure that so far as we've been able to do so, we've followed the process of proper consultation properly, and it hasn't been easy to do, not helped by large numbers of comments out with the normal process from all sides, but we think we've done it. And then the other question is whether what we've designed is a reasonable response to the Mayor's policies and road use in London. Now, we think, in respect to the most controversial one, the East West Cycle Superhighway, we're not pleased with ourselves, because that's the wrong expression. But I'm very grateful to have some very talented people who've managed to produce substantial mitigation in the traffic worsening that would otherwise have taken place. And I don't myself believe much more we can do to affect it. But it is clear that it will that some journey times will lengthen, and there'll be some reduction in reliability. And there are people for whom that makes a big difference. Some of them are very vocal about it.
Yes. Others,
actually, I mean, it is interesting. You've never seen the freight and logistics industry here, because they have these concerns, but they're rather more measured about how they express them than keeping threatening judicial reviews and legal action. And we've rewarded them to the extent to which we're able with meaningful discussions about what we can do to make their lives easier. We are, in fact, doing that even with people who do threaten judicial reviews, because we're reasonable people. But one of the reasons that I depreciate some of that is that you've got in the end to think, well, actually, the Mayor was elected on a manifesto. He's made his manifesto quite clear. You've been beating me up for years about not delivering it fast enough. Then we get to a decent proposition. We get 20,000 responses. We have a pretty difficult time getting it through the board, and then somebody says at the end, "Oh, we'll just slow it down." Yeah. And you say, "Okay, well, we'll carry on with that too, and we'll get to the other end." And if it's found that we've done something wrong, which it could be because we're not perfect, then we'll correct that as well. But it's a long old process. It's a long old process, and it really isn't easy to do. And if it was, we'd have done it earlier.
And briefly, I'm very conscious of time. Any thoughts on how you might get a compromise with the Royal Parks?
Compromise?
With the Royal Parks? Or an agreement?
That's the best way of putting this. I think the Royal Parks ought to accept that the Mayor's determination to have segregated cycleways is as justifiable a reason to have changes around the memorial in front of Buckingham Palace as it is on the embankment, on Lower Thames Street, on Lancaster Gate, on roads in London used by a lot of people. That's what I think, and I very much hope they'll come to that conclusion.
Particularly as the Mayor appoints them, you'd have thought that would be helpful. Let's move on to pedestrian safety. Tom.